Hey everyone, it's Ed Gutowski, and I wanted to welcome you to English 300. Hey, I'm super jazzed for our class. Our class is going to be a lot of fun, and you're in for a real treat because the reading that we're going to look at is going to be really fantastic. So what I wanted to do was just kind of briefly sort of introduce you to the class, the procedures in the course, kind of get a sense of what the class is going to be about. We're an 8-week English 300 summer school class. English 300 is always fun, whether it's both teaching it online or on ground. I've had really great success. It's one of the reasons why I'm using the specific books we're using for our class. And English 300 really focuses on rhetoric and argument. And we'll get into the rhetoric and argument sort of starting this week. And I got to tell you that students really like the rhetoric. I have great lectures setting us up to understand how rhetoric and argument are linked. So that part of class will be really, really fun. So let me just talk about the books that we're going to use for class. The first book we're going to look at is this book here. It's called Into the Wild. It's by Jon Krakauer. And really, again, I've had great success with this, teaching this novel. Sometimes students have said they've read it before, maybe in high school, but when they get into my class, they really appreciate kind of the unique aspect that we get into it, because we'll look at it some angles and look at some arguments that will really different from what students have expected from before. And one of the reasons why I use this book is because I think students can really relate to the main character. So the main character is really in the same situation I find many of my college students are at. He's going to Emory University, which is a real prestigious school in the Deep South. And as he's going to college, he has these three big questions. Why am I going to college? What do I want out of my education? What do I want out of life? And I think these universal questions are always really important. At some point in our lives, we always cross these big three universal questions. And this kid did something really foolish. When he graduates, he ends up getting rid of all of his possessions, getting rid of all of his money, and he disappears into the wild, and no one knows what happens to him. And as you can imagine, his parents are freaked out. They don't know where their son is, and they hire kind of a private detective to find out where their son went. And 6 months later, this kid walks into Alaska with 6 pounds of rice and a pistol and tries to live off the land and dies of starvation. And Jon Krakauer, is the author of the book, wants to know what would motivate a kid who had everything going for him, right? Really smart, educated. He had a little bit of savings and some money to do something so crazy and brash. And so as you're reading the book, I kind of want you to imagine you're the private detectives that the family has hired to kind of find out what hints do we have that might explain why this kid went on his epic journey. And that's the book that we'll start in. We'll get into the book in week 2. The other book we're going to look at, this is our textbook. It's called the St. Martin's Handbook. And this is the book that will really help us to understand rhetoric, argument, fallacies, and MLA. I've used this book a lot. Really, students can relate to the ideas. It's really simple to understand how MLA works, how rhetoric and argument works, how to identify fallacies. For this book, you probably want to get the 8th edition because it's probably the most current edition. For the other textbooks, it's okay if you find them cheaper on Amazon, but I would prefer with the St. Martin's Handbook, you get the 8th edition. The other book that we're going to look at is called the Siegel Reader Essays. Interesting enough, right, these are a series of essays. We'll look at and we'll analyze the arguments. It's interesting because at the end of the semester, I generally have students vote on what's their favorite book is, and a lot of times people pick the Siegel Reader Essays because they like the essays. They like the arguments, so it's been really popular with my class, so I kind of continued to use that one. And then we're going to end with a book called The Hate You Give. And this is an interesting book that will really help us. We'll examine kind of very contemporary, help us look at issues that deal with kind of race and racism in America. I really started to use this book just before COVID hit, so a lot of my experience teaching this book has been online with really great success. I mean, I think students really wanted to talk about issues that the book addresses. There are some interesting arguments, and we can talk about whether or not it's appropriate for our class overall. But what I just wanted to do was to let you know these are the books that we're going to use for class. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a great class. A couple things that you need to do. You need to send me a welcome email before Thursday, I believe June 9th. And that way I can deal with ads and kind of get to know you on a little personal level. For class, basically how it's going to be set up is that everything will be due on Friday, and so you'll have a full week to work on the class assignments. I'll check in each day to kind of monitor your progress, and then so we won't meet in person unless you want to visit me during my Zoom office hours. So if you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to getting our class started. It's going to be a lot of fun.